Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hopefully this finds you on Palm Sunday. I know this has been a hard and trying time, but I am thankful for technology that allows us to be able to meet in a new and different way. I have to ask this morning, is anyone tired of waiting? This week I realized just how much I hate waiting. Waiting for info, waiting for groceries because we can't go multiple times. When I need something, I just always ran to the store. Waiting for the right time, waiting to get better, waiting to see what's coming next, just waiting. I don't think anyone ever imagined we'd be giving this much up for Lent. It feels like we're continually losing something new, something different, something else we can't do. But I think at the same time we are also gaining some new things, some new gifts, some new abilities. As I looked at this text, the thing that really drew me to it was those who for generations spent their lives waiting, wanting and waiting. Oddly enough, I'm going to ask you to wait a little bit as we go through this sermon. The very beginning, the middle part of the sermon has a little bit of church history, or I should say Bible history in it. And so I know that can be slow going, so bear with me. I think what we get to in the end is an important issue, an important message for us today. Today I'm not going to just go back 2,000 years to the day of Palm Sunday. I'm actually going to go back significantly farther. I want to go back past the kings, past David and Saul, past the prophets, back farther to a time even before the Promised Land, to a time of great slavery, to the time of the Israelite people when they spent 400 years in slavery in Egypt. I start there because it is to celebrate Passover that the Jews flocked to the city for Palm Sunday. Jesus and his followers go to Jerusalem that first day of the week to prepare for a celebration of remembrance, to remember one of the greatest times of waiting in Jewish history, to the time where the Jews, the Israelites, waited in Egypt, to a time when they had no hope. And in the midst of that hopelessness, God calls a man who very nearly refuses to change their world. The Israelites had moved from neighbors to slaves over the 400 years. Over generations, they moved from friends to possessions. They were an oppressed people who found their oppression slow coming, but profound in every sense of the word. It is from this time, this people, that the celebration of Passover comes. It's a story that begins with Moses, the repeated agreement and reneging of the Pharaoh, finally ending in the plagues, the deadliest of all, the death of the firstborn male, for all those except those who put blood of the lamb on their doorpost, trusting in God. The hurried preparations as they got ready to flee, no time for leaven in the bread, the flight from Egypt being pursued by soldiers, the miraculous parting of the Red Sea which allowed them to enter through but drowned those who came after them. The hardship of wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, the giving of the 10 Commandments. Now that they are free, how shall they live? What does the Lord require of them? Jesus and his followers enter Jerusalem for this, the first day of the week, this Palm Sunday, to prepare for this festival. This remembering of the journey from oppression to freedom, from corruption to purity, from death to life. But this journey to life is not yet complete. As the Jews understood, it's with hope every year that they celebrate. Hope that the Messiah will come to fulfill, to bring it to completion. Jesus joins this Passover feast as any good Jew and even not so good Jew would do, in hope and anticipation of a new deliverance, a new passing from hopelessness to life. It's here we find Jesus entering on the donkey, fulfilling a Jewish tradition, but not a Jewish expectation. It's here we find Jesus entering with all the pomp and circumstance of a two-bit circus, rather than that of a royal army. All this pointing to the fact that this Messiah is not what they honestly were expecting. Things are often not what we expect. During the time of Moses, freedom didn't look like they expected it would look. Moses didn't look like the leader he should be. Israelites didn't leave Egypt like they thought they should, and where they ended up was not at all what they expected. They made that quite clear through their complaints and their faithlessness. Hundreds of years after Moses, after the promised land, after the kings they had, they were still not satisfied. The Jews of Jesus' day, they thought they had it all figured out. They knew the equation which would bring about the Messiah. If this, then that, then the new king. New leadership would come to power. The Messiah would come and change everything. In the remembrance of the Passover, the Jews would leave the door ajar, an empty chair at the table for Elijah. For if Elijah comes, the Messiah is on his way. And when the Messiah comes, finally the will of God will be done on earth as it is in heaven. They left the door open. They left the empty chair. But they didn't see and couldn't see the one who came in and filled it. They wanted freedom from corrupt rulers when all they really needed was faith in God. The Jews that Palm Sunday wanted a king like David, a prophet like Elijah, a miracle worker like Moses. They wanted someone who would fit their understanding of the God who brought them from desperation to life. They wrote the ending to the story, just as I expect the Israelites did as they prepared for the leaving of Egypt and the promised land they would enter into. In their waiting, they wrote the ending. The Jews watched confused as Jesus entered Jerusalem that day, in peace and hope as the answer to their hopes and prayers. They wanted freedom from a corrupt leader, but all they needed was trust in God. The failure of the Jews that Palm Sunday in the coming week was they created their own ending. They created their understanding of Messiah and what he was to be. They created their own God. And when the Messiah came, they could not see him. They couldn't see through their own slavery. Through all the history I've given you this morning, and it is a lot, the one single unifying idea is that we are slaves to our own gods, our own inventions, our own issues, our own ideas, our own stories we've created. And when we do that, we miss the God who is calling to us. The people of Israel waited so long to get to the promised land because they needed to shed not just their slavery to the ruler of Egypt, but their slavery, their own identities, their own ideas of what it was to be slave and what their slavery had taught them. The people of Israel, as they wandered through the desert, had to let go of their many gods and had to learn to trust in the one to only serve the true God. The people of Israel, as they walked through the promised land, were still unable to leave those false gods behind and find that identity, that true identity in God. The people of Israel, the Jews of Jesus' day, could not cast off the slavery of their own making, the slavery to an idea of who and what the Messiah was to be. They could not cast off the slavery of control, the slavery of power, the slavery to self. As I read this text and as I went through this history, I had to ask myself, how are we like them? I wonder what things we fall slave to today. A lot of the things we thought would never change in this world, the things we have relied on and put our trust in, have been turned upside down in a matter of weeks. A lot of things we have put our trust in have failed us. It's a good time to take stock of our masters, the things we have become slave to. It's a good time to look at things and decide if they need to be done differently. What holds your heart today? Where is your faith and your trust? What needs casting off? What holds you from being the child of God you were created to be? What keeps you from seeing God's will in your life? Where can you let go of old ideas and grab hold of new faith? I don't know about you, but I suspect that you too are watching and seeing new ways to do old things. And maybe realizing some of your old things are not necessarily good. We become creatures of habit. We become slaves to our situation. Maybe something new has entered your life this season. Maybe something that you need to not give up once life gets normal again. I know in my own life, new faith is growing through solitude, an adjustment of the ideals I held, wants I had, desires I looked for. With all this change taking place, it's a good time to realize the things that are really important, the things that are life-giving, the things that we need. I challenge you at this time, at this season, to look for the life-giving things in your life. I pray that when we all come out of this with a new view of life and of God, a new faith and a new trust, that we may even have a new understanding of who God is, that we may see him more clearly and understand him more clearly. Amen.